Hello everyone, my name is Moji. You're watching a Bitcoin Bubble News channel. But I think we're well on our way. Sailor in Madeira said that this is the best time for Bitcoin ever. I agree with him. I believe there will be a huge shift in the next 10 years. The dollar is not going to fail because of that. Fiat won't go away because of that. It doesn't mean that central banks will go out of business. They should all still be here, I think. However, I think that in the next 5 or 10 years, the balance of power will change very significantly in favor of sound money. Here's why Lawrence Lepard, head of Equity Management Associates, thinks Bitcoin's price will go through the roof soon. Lepard says that only a small group of people understand and trade in Bitcoin right now. That group is thought to be about 10% of the developed world. Like the internet and cell phones, which were met with resistance at first because they were seen as slow and pricey, Bitcoin is also facing doubt and opposition. At the moment, some people are hesitant to buy Bitcoin. They thought they missed the chance to save money when it was cheaper. But Lepard thinks that Bitcoin's present value is low compared to what it will be worth in the future. He thinks that Bitcoin's value will go up a lot as more people use it, like how cell phones went from being expensive to being widely used over time. Also, a CoinDesk story says that shoppers will probably keep coming even though Bitcoin has gone back up to $60,000. Marcus Tan from 10x Research says that Bitcoin may go up to $1.66 million, but this rise will only last for a short time because of technology problems. He thinks the price will drop again, this time to around $1.50,000, which will make dealing difficult. K33 study also says that this summer, somewhere between 75,000 and 180,000 BTC worth $4.3 billion and $6.8 billion will be sold. This selling pressure is likely to have an effect on Bitcoin's performance until October, making the market unstable. Who knows when the internet came out? How do people wake up to that? Sure, there were those of us who joined early and knew what it was. We were excited about it and knew it would change the world. My mother, who is 70 years old now, was like, why the hell do I need this at the time? Not only that, but she wasn't going to buy a computer and connect to the internet that way either. After about 10 years, when all of our kids had it, we were emailing each other, and she wasn't on the list. Hey, set me up on this internet thing, she said. Actually, I think it's because of word of mouth and people knowing about it, right? Because of this, I thought that about 10% of us might kind of get it or be aware of it. Let's be generous and say that maybe 10% of the developed world is interested in this trade in this area. Some might say it's even less than that. So we'll get to 90%. From Gladwell's point of view, it took us 15 years to get to this point, and another 15 years will bring us to 90%. This is what I saw with cell phones. When cell phones first came out, they were really bad, and each call cost 40 cents. People who were very wealthy were the only ones who had them. They could only make 5-minute calls, but they paid for them because they needed to. We all have smartphones now, and calls are almost always free. For someone who is doing pretty well, the monthly fee isn't very much. Also, this is how tech works. People don't like it at first because it's a little tricky and not fully understood. A lot of people think it's magic money on the internet when you get all the normal pushback, but over time, they realize, hey, wait a minute, wow, the price of that thing you bought has gone up a lot. I also think this is a good thing. I can get a good return on this item if I buy it. We're having some of that right now. The thing we have to get past is that lots of people look at it and say, okay, I get it. I like the main idea. You might even be right. I don't understand how I can pay $60,000 when you bought it for so much less. I'm trying to get them to believe that I first bought it for $2, so how could I pay $2,300, $500, or whatever? And one day your grandchildren will buy Bitcoin when it's worth between $2 and $3 million each. They will ask, wait a minute, you mean to tell me you bought a whole Bitcoin for $60,000? How in the world did that happen? This means that as it gets used, it kind of adds up. I think that anyone who wants to support this new invention, which I think will change and improve the world and also make things a lot more expensive, should do so. But putting that aside, I really want to see the world fixed because I think it is very broken because we don't have sound money and live in a fiat system. I'm writing my letter for the June quarter, and all I have in it is a chart that shows how well off everyone is. There are 1% of people in the US who own 50% of the wealth. I don't know if you know this, that's 10 times more than in the 1980s. There used to be middle-class people in this country. There were some people who did really well and some who didn't so well, but overall, most people did fine. And it's getting more and more split into, haves and have-nots instead of society. What that means for society is all sorts of bad things like politics, anger, unfairness, and so on. That's what bothers me the most. That's the biggest change I've seen in my life. I think I grew up in a country that was a lot more economically balanced than it is now. Even though it wasn't perfect, we were in the Vietnam War than it is now. It wasn't just the billionaires and us. We talked about this before the show The Money is Broken. It took a long time to do that. It began when the Federal Reserve, a type of fractional reserve banking, was set up. It went on for most of the 20th century and ended when Nixon got rid of the gold standard in 1971. It's just gotten worse and worse over time, and I think we've reached a point where everyone can see it more clearly and things are moving faster. Now more than ever, it's important to keep your money in things that the government can't print if you want to save it. And Bitcoin is most likely the best choice. Another good choice is gold or silver, which can be put behind Bitcoin. This fits Stein's law, which says that if something can't last forever, it will end. The numbers don't work out for them. They can't add to their debt faster than their GDP grows without ending up in a problem because of the interest costs on their debt. You know what? You're right. It's been going on longer than it should have. It might keep going for another 5 or 10 years. Some people think longer than I do. In 5 or 10 years, I think this will all come to a head. However, I also thought it would be over in 2008, and they were able to get there. It's now at the level of a national currency. We had a house bubble during the dot-com bubble. There's now a boom in safe currencies. And because of how the government's finances are set up, we continue to spend more than we bring in taxes. This means that the debt is growing, and as interest rates rise, so do the costs of those debts. We're stuck in a debt doom loop where higher interest rates mean bigger deficits, which means you have to sell more debt. James Lavish has written a lot about this. It makes sense that higher interest rates and wish rush repeat would happen if more debt was sold to meet the same amount of demand. There is only one way out: a negative feedback loop. And I think we're getting to the point where kicking the can will get really, really hard. I mean, we had a lot of money printed in the COVID example during this time of switchover. They've been able to slow that down and tighten things up a bit by cutting the Fed's balance sheet from $9 to $7 trillion. That being said, something will break at some point, and the system will not have enough money to work. And they'll have to make the same choice they always do: either print money to keep the system going, even though they know that could lead to inflation, or don't print money and let everything fall apart, even though they know that could look a lot like 1929. We know what they will pick because we've seen them pick it for 100 years. In Silicon Valley Bank, they picked it in 2008 with COVID and all the way back to 1998 with LTC. In my job, I've seen all of these people, and they always pick the same thing. And they'll use the same reason they did in 2008. Henry Paulson got down on his knees in front of Nancy Pelosi and told her, "Look, if you don't give us this $700 billion for TARP, the ATMs won't work tomorrow." It's like they have a gun to your head and are threatening the end of the world if you don't print. Also, guess what? When lawmakers are in that situation, they will print. We are sure that they will print. I also think that the Fed's